The air in the funeral home was heavy with the scent of lilies, their sweetness mingling with the sharp ache of grief. I stood beside my son Daniel's casket, my hand trembling as I reached out to touch his cheek one last time. Cold. So cold. Like the winter mornings when he'd run inside. Cheeks flushed, begging for hot cocoa. My Daniel, my only child, gone at 42. At 70, I never dreamed I'd outlive him. No mother should. The room buzzed softly with murmured condolences, but all I could hear was the hollow thud of my own heart. I'm Margaret Thompson, and this is the story of how I lost my son and found something I didn't expect myself. It's not a tale I ever thought I'd tell, but here I am, sharing it like I'm sitting across from you at my kitchen table. A cup of chamomile tea between us. It's a story of love, betrayal, and the quiet strength that blooms when you think you've got nothing left. The funeral home was a modest brick building on the edge of Raleigh, North Carolina, its walls lined with faded wallpaper that reminded me of my grandmother's parlor. Rows of chairs faced the casket, filled with neighbors, colleagues, and faces I vaguely recognized from Daniel's life. They came to pay their respects, their eyes soft with pity, their hands warm as they pressed mine. I nodded, thanked them, but their words slipped past me like rain on a window pane. Nothing felt real. How could the world keep turning when my boy was gone? Claire, my daughter-in-law of 17 years, sat beside me in the front row, her black dress crisp and tailored, her blonde hair swept into a flawless chignon. She dabbed her eyes with a silk scarf, the kind you'd see in a department store window, monogrammed with her initials. I'd loved Claire like a daughter, welcomed her when she and Daniel fell in love at UNC. She was bright, ambitious, with a smile that could light up a room. I thought we were family, bound by shared Sunday dinners and holiday mornings, watching Lucas and Emily tear into Christmas presents. But today, something in her touch, a fleeting squeeze of my hand, felt rehearsed, like a line in a play she'd practiced too many times. "Margaret, do you need anything?" she whispered, her voice smooth as honey. "I'm just stepping out for some air." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. She rose gracefully, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor, and made her way to the back of the room. I watched her go, her silhouette framed by the stained glass window, and wondered how we'd hold each other up now that Daniel was gone. He'd been our bridge, our common ground. Without him, what were we? The cancer had come like a thief, stealing him in just 4 months. One day he was coaching Lucas's soccer team, laughing as Emily sketched wildflowers in her notebook. The next, he was in a hospital bed, his blue eyes dimming with each passing week. There wasn't time to say everything that needed saying, to ask the questions that piled up in my heart. Did he know how proud I was? Did he feel my love in those final days? When words failed us both, I clutched the program in my lap, his smiling face printed on the cover, and felt the weight of all I'd lost. I needed my arthritis medication. The ache in my knees was flaring, a cruel reminder that my body was still here, still demanding attention. Even as my heart broke, I leaned on my cane, a simple wooden one Henry had carved for me years ago, and made my way down the hallway toward the restroom. The funeral home was quiet here, away from the hum of voices, the air cooler, tinged with the faint smell of cigarette smoke from an alcove where mourners sometimes gathered. I moved slowly, each step a negotiation with my joints, until I heard her voice, Claire's, low and sharp, drifting from around the corner. "Once this is over, we'll move her to a home," she said, her words slicing through the stillness. "The house is mine. Mark, she won't be a burden much longer." I froze, my cane trembling in my grip, my heart stuttered, a frantic bird trapped in my chest. She couldn't mean me. Not me, but her voice continued, cold and certain, like she was discussing a piece of furniture that no longer fit her decor. She's too old to be rattling around my house, Claire said. There's a place on the edge of town, perfectly suitable for her age. She'll be out in a month. A man's voice, Mark, I presumed, replied, his tone smooth, almost amused. Won't she fight it? Claire laughed. A sound I'd once found musical, now brittle as frost. With what Daniel made sure everything's in my name. She signed it all over years ago, thinking it was for tax purposes. She doesn't even know what's coming. My knuckles whitened around my cane. The restroom forgotten. I pressed a hand to the wall, steadying myself as the world tilted. All these years. I'd thought Claire loved me. I'd opened my home, my heart, given her everything I had. When Henry died 9 years ago, I sold our house, the one where Daniel learned to ride a bike, where we'd strung Christmas lights every December, and gave them the $350,000 to buy their home at 312 Willow Lane. I'd trusted them, believed Claire when she said, Mom, let us take care of you. We're family. Now her words echoed in my mind, each one a betrayal burden, old, out. I retreated silently, my breath shallow, my mind racing. Back in the viewing room, I sank into my chair, my eyes fixed on Daniel's peaceful face. Had he known, had he seen through Claire's smiles, her carefully chosen words, I remembered his voice, weak but clear, from one of our last moments alone. When Claire was out arranging hospice, Mom, he'd whispered, gripping my hand, I've made arrangements. You'll be okay. At the time, I thought he meant the funeral, the bills. Now, I wondered if he'd meant something more. Claire returned, slipping into the seat beside me, her perfume a sharp contrast to the lily's softness. Feeling better. Margaret, she asked, her smile practiced, her eyes flicking over me like I was a chore to be checked off. Yes, I lied. My voice steady despite the storm inside. Just needed a moment. She nodded, patting my arm, but her touch felt impatient, like she was already counting the days until I was gone. I looked at her profile, flawless, composed, and saw a stranger, the woman I'd baked pies with, the one who'd hugged me when Daniel proposed, was a mask. Behind it was someone who saw me as an obstacle, a relic to be tucked away in a nursing home. The rest of the funeral passed in a blur. I stood as they closed Daniel's casket, my heart splintering with each turn of the lid. I spoke at the service, my voice breaking as I shared a memory of Daniel at 10, building a birdhouse in our backyard, his tongue poking out in concentration. The crowd smiled through tears, but Claire's face remained still, her eyes distant. At the cemetery, I tossed a rose onto his grave, the red petals stark against the earth, and whispered, I love you, son, always. Claire stood beside me, her arm linked with mine, the picture of a grieving widow supporting her mother-in-law. But I felt the falseness in her grip, the impatience in her sigh. As we drove back to Willow Lane, I stared out the car window, the familiar streets of Raleigh, blurring past the diner where Daniel and I used to share milkshakes, past the park where he'd push Lucas on the swings. The house loomed ahead, its white shutters and wraparound porch once a symbol of family, now a battlefield. I thought of the garden out back, the roses Daniel and I had planted after Henry died. They were wilting now, neglected, like so much else in my life. But something in me stirred. A spark of the woman I'd been before grief and age wore me down. I remembered 1975, the year Henry and I bought our first home in Cary, just outside Raleigh. We were young, broke, and wildly in love, planting a garden under a Carolina sky. Daniel was a toddler then, toddling through the dirt, giggling as he chased butterflies. That garden was our promise to each other, to our son a place to grow, to belong. I'd given it all up for Daniel and Claire, thinking I was building a new home with them. Now, I saw the truth. I'd been a guest in their world, tolerated until I was no longer useful. Claire parked the car. her silence heavy. "We'll get through this together." "Margaret," she said, her voice smooth, but her eyes avoided mine. "Yes," I said, my fingers tracing the carved handle of my cane, together. But in my heart, I was alone, standing at the edge of a betrayal I hadn't seen coming. I thought of Daniel's words. I've made arrangements and clung to them like a lifeline. The reading of his will was tomorrow at Hayes & Carter law firm downtown. Claire thought she'd won, that she could sweep me out of her life like dust under a rug. But I wasn't ready to be swept away. Not yet. I stepped out of the car, the evening air warm against my skin, carrying the faint scent of honeysuckle from a neighbor's yard. The garden waited behind the house, its roses drooping but still alive, still holding on. I looked at them and made a silent promise to Daniel, to myself. If there was justice, if there was a way to honor my son's love, I'd find it. I'd tend this garden again, make it bloom, no matter what Claire had planned. The stars were just beginning to peek through the dusk, tiny pinpricks of light against the fading day. I closed my eyes, picturing Daniel's smile, and whispered, "Help me, son, show me the way." If this story touches your heart, please subscribe to hear how it unfolds. Comment below with the city you're reading from. I'd love to know where my journey reaches you. The house at 312 Willow Lane felt like a stranger's home as I stepped inside. My cane tapping softly on the hardwood floor. The air was thick with the scent of Claire's lavender candles, a sharp contrast to the lilies that still clung to my memory from Daniel's funeral yesterday. I paused in the foyer, my eyes tracing the familiar lines of the staircase, the framed photos of Lucas and Emily smiling on the wall. This was the home I'd helped build, paid for with the sale of my own, yet it no longer felt like mine. Claire's words from the funeral home echoed in my mind. "She's too old to be rattling around my house." Each syllable was a splinter, burrowing deeper into my heart. I'm Margaret Thompson, 70 years old, and I'm telling you this story as if we're sitting together on my back porch, watching the fireflies blink in the dusk. It's not easy to share, peeling back the layers of grief and betrayal, but there's something healing in it. Like tending a garden after a long winter. I want you to know how it felt to stand at the edge of losing everything and find a spark of strength I thought I'd buried long ago. The living room was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses against your ears. Claire was upstairs, her heels clicking faintly as she moved about, probably sorting through Daniel's things. I didn't want to see her, not yet. My knees ached, and my heart was heavier than I could bear. So I made my way to the back door, leaning on my cane. The garden waited outside, a small patch of earth where Daniel and I had planted roses after Henry died. It was wilting now, the petals curling brown at the edges, neglected in the chaos of Daniel's illness. I settled onto the wooden bench, the one Daniel had built for my 65th birthday, and let the evening wrap around me. The sky was a soft Carolina blue, streaked with pink as the sun dipped low. I closed my eyes and let myself drift back to 1982 when life was simpler. Though it didn't feel that way at the time, I was a high school English teacher then, pouring my heart into lesson plans, dreaming of opening a community library someday. Henry was sick, his heart weakening with each year, and I made the choice to leave my job to care for him. It wasn't a sacrifice I regretted, not then, not now, but it changed me. I packed away my books, my ambitions, and became the woman who kept our family steady. Henry would hold my hand at night, his voice rough but warm. "Maggie, you're our rock. Don't know what we'd do without you." When Henry passed in 2015, the world tilted. Daniel and Claire were there, helping with the funeral, sitting with me through those endless nights when grief was a weight I couldn't lift. It was Claire who suggested I sell my house in Cary, the one Henry and I had bought in 75, where Daniel had grown up. "Mom," she said, her voice all sweetness, It's too big for you alone. Come live with us, we've got plenty of room, and we can use the money to secure your future. Daniel nodded, his arm around her, and I believed them. I sold the house for $350,000, handed it over to them to invest, and moved into Willow Lane. I never saw a bank statement, never asked where the money went. They were family. Why would I doubt them? Now, sitting in the garden, I felt like a fool. The roses stared back at me, their thorns sharp despite their faded blooms. I'd given everything, my home, my savings, my trust, and Claire saw me as a burden to be discarded. I thought of Lucas and Emily, my grandchildren, and my chest tightened. Lucas, 15, with Daniel's serious eyes, and Emily, 11, with her sketchbook always in hand. Claire controlled their time with me, always hovering, saying, "The kids have homework, Mom," or, "Let's not overwhelm them." I'd accepted it, grateful for any moment I got, but now I wondered, was she keeping them from me on purpose, building a wall I hadn't seen until it was too high to climb? The back door creaked, and Claire stepped out, her silhouette sharp against the porch light. She'd changed into a silk blouse and tailored slacks, her hair still perfect despite the long day. "Margaret, you shouldn't be out here alone," she said, her tone a mix of concern and impatience. "It's getting chilly." "I'm fine," I said, my voice quieter than I meant. I kept my eyes on the roses, avoiding her gaze. She sighed, a sound I now recognized as irritation masked as care. "You need to rest. Tomorrow's a big day with the lawyer. We'll sort everything out." She paused, then added, "For all of us." The way she said it, smooth and final, sent a shiver through me. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She turned and went back inside, leaving me with the hum of crickets and the weight of her words. Sort everything out. She meant moving me out, claiming the house, erasing me from their lives. I gripped my cane, the wood worn smooth under my palm, and felt a flicker of something new: anger, yes, but also resolve. I wasn't ready to be sorted out, not by Claire, not by anyone. Inside, I moved slowly to the guest room, never truly mine, though I'd lived here a decade. The walls were bare except for a single photo of Daniel, Lucas, and Emily at the Blue Ridge Mountains cabin, another property I'd helped fund with Henry's life insurance. Claire had called it a smart investment, and I'd signed the papers without question. The room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner, a reminder of Claire's need for everything to be perfect, controlled. I sank onto the bed, my joints protesting, and opened the drawer of the nightstand. There, nestled among old letters, was Daniel's watch, a simple silver one I'd given him for his 30th birthday. I'd had it engraved, "To Daniel, love always, Mom." He'd worn it every day, even in the hospital, until the end. I held the watch, its weight grounding me, and let my mind wander to 1990 when Daniel brought Claire home from college. She was a whirlwind of charm, her laugh filling our quiet house. I'd been nervous, wanting to impress her, baking my mother's peach cobbler and setting the table with my best china. Claire had hugged me, saying, "Mrs. Thompson, I feel like I'm already home." I'd believed her, loved her for loving my son. But now, I saw the cracks I'd missed: her impatience when I was slow with my arthritis, her sighs when I asked for help with the computer, the way she'd schedule family dinners when my book club met, then act hurt when I couldn't come. "Family's so important to Daniel," she'd say, making me feel guilty for having a life outside their orbit. The watch ticked faintly, a ghost of Daniel's presence. I thought of his last months, how Claire had been busy with work, leaving me to sit with him in the hospital. She'd started dressing differently: sleek dresses, new jewelry, subtle makeup even for errands. I'd thought it was her way of coping, holding on to normalcy as Daniel faded. Now, I wondered about Mark. The man on the phone, the one she'd laughed with while planning my exile. Was he the reason for her late nights? Her hushed calls behind closed doors. The thought made my stomach churn, not just for me, but for Daniel. Had he known, had he carried that betrayal in his final days? A soft knock startled me. "Grandma." It was Emily. Her voice small through the door. I tucked the watch back in the drawer and opened it. She stood there, her dark curls loose, clutching her sketchbook. Her eyes were red, and my heart ached for her. "Come in, sweetheart," I said, patting the bed. She curled up beside me, her warmth a comfort I hadn't realized I needed. "Can't sleep," she shook her head. "I miss Dad." Her voice broke, and I pulled her close, stroking her hair. "I know, honey. I miss him too." I wanted to say more, to tell her we'd be okay, but Claire's words hung over me like a storm cloud. I looked at Emily's sketchbook, open to a drawing of a rose, delicate and unfinished. "This is beautiful," I said, "just like the ones in our garden." "Dad said you taught him how to plant them," she said, her voice soft. "Can we fix the garden? Grandma, make it pretty again." My throat tightened. "Yes, we will. I promise." It was a small promise, but it felt like a lifeline, a way to hold on to Daniel, to fight for our place here. The door opened, and Claire appeared, her expression tight. "Emily, it's late. You need to get to bed." Her eyes flicked to me, cool and assessing. "Margaret, don't keep her up. She's got school tomorrow." "She just needed a moment," I said, keeping my tone even. Emily hugged me, then slipped out, leaving me alone with Claire's stare. "Rest up," Claire said, her voice clipped. "We've got a lot to handle at the lawyer's." She closed the door, and I heard her footsteps fade down the hall. I lay back, the watches ticking filling the silence. Claire thought she held all the cards, that I was a tired old woman with nowhere to go. But I wasn't done. Daniel's words. "I've made arrangements," were a seed planted in my heart, waiting to grow. I thought of the garden, those roses fighting to survive. They were still there, roots deep in the earth, and so was I. Tomorrow, at the law office, I'd find out what Daniel had left me. Not just a house or money, but a chance to stand tall, to reclaim the woman I'd been before grief and trust stole her away. I closed my eyes, picturing 1982 again. Henry and I laughing as we dug in the dirt, Daniel toddling between us. That garden had been our love made visible, a promise that endured through storms. I'd lost so much, but I hadn't lost that promise, not yet. As sleep crept in, I whispered to Daniel, to the stars, to the roses waiting outside, "I'm still here, son, and I'm not going anywhere." The morning light crept through the guest room's lace curtains, painting soft patterns on the faded quilt. I sat on the bed's edge, my hands clasped tightly, Daniel's silver watch, a quiet weight in my pocket. Today was the reading of his will at Hayes & Carter Law Firm in downtown Raleigh, and my heart fluttered with a mix of fear and fragile hope. Claire's words from the funeral home, "She's too old to be rattling around my house," cut deeper than my arthritis ever could. But Daniel's promise, "I've made arrangements," was a whisper of strength I clung to. I'm Margaret Thompson, 70 years old, and I'm telling you this story like we're sharing a pot of tea in my kitchen. The kind that warms your hands and heart. It's about finding your footing when the ground's been pulled out from under you, about holding fast to love when betrayal tries to steal it away. I dressed carefully, choosing a navy dress I'd worn to Daniel's college graduation, its fabric soft with memories. The mirror showed a woman, worn by time, grey hair pinned neatly, lines carved by laughter and loss, but my eyes held a new resolve, a spark I thought I'd lost. I slipped the watch into my purse, its faint ticking a reminder of Daniel's love, and made my way downstairs. The house at 312 Willow Lane was hushed, the air laced with the sharp scent of Claire's coffee brewing. Lucas and Emily sat at the kitchen table, their breakfast untouched, grief shadowing their young faces. "Morning, Grandma," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. She hugged her sketchbook, a pencil tucked into her dark curls. Lucas, 15 and lanky, stared at his phone, earbuds dangling, shutting out the world. "Morning, sweetheart," I said, resting a hand on Emily's shoulder. I wanted to reach for Lucas, to bridge the gap I felt growing, but his silence held me back. Claire's influence was there, I knew, weaving doubts about me into his heart. Claire entered, her black blazer crisp, her blonde hair flawless. "We leave in 10 minutes, she said, her tone brisk, like she was checking off a list. Her eyes met mine, cool and distant, measuring me like a piece of furniture she'd soon rearrange. "The lawyer's waiting." "I'll be ready," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Emily gave me a small, hesitant smile, and I held it like a treasure as we piled into the car. The drive to Raleigh's downtown was silent, the city stirring around us, dogwood blossoms glowing pink. Morning traffic humming past the state capitol. I gazed out the window, my mind slipping to 1995, when Daniel introduced Claire. She'd been a burst of light, her laugh filling our modest carry home. I'd fussed over dinner, baking cornbread and setting out my mother's china, hoping she'd feel welcome. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm already home," she'd said, hugging me. I'd believed her, loved her for loving my son. Now, I saw the cracks her impatience when I moved slowly, her subtle jabs about my old-fashioned ways. The law office was a sleek space of glass and polished wood, its air cool and sterile. Lucas slouched on a leather couch, scrolling his phone, while Emily clutched her sketchbook, her eyes wide. Claire paced, her heels clicking sharply, her composure a thin veneer. Laura Kim, Daniel's lawyer, greeted us with a firm handshake and a kind smile, her presence steadying. She led us to a conference room where a stack of papers waited on a mahogany table. A photo of Daniel sat on a sideboard, his blue eyes bright, and my breath caught, a fresh wave of grief washing over me. "Thank you for coming," Laura said, her voice calm. "This is a hard day. I know Daniel was very specific about his wishes, and I'm here to ensure they're followed exactly as he intended." Claire nodded, her lips tight, her fingers tapping under the table, a nervous habit I hadn't noticed before. I watched her, my stomach knotting. She thought this was her victory, the moment she'd claim our home, our family, and push me out. But Daniel's words echoed, and I prayed they held the truth I needed. Laura adjusted her glasses and began. "First, the family residence at 312 Willow Lane and the Blue Ridge Mountains cabin are placed in a family trust. Margaret Thompson is named trustee, with the right to live in either property for her lifetime. Upon her passing, both will transfer equally to Lucas and Emily Thompson." The air stilled. Claire's face paled, her fingers freezing. "That's not possible," she said, her voice sharp. "The house is in my name. Daniel and I." "Actually," Laura cut in, gentle but firm. "Daniel transferred his interest in both properties to the trust 3 years ago, with your signature on the documents. The Blue Ridge cabin was purchased directly into the trust, never in your name." I blinked, my heart racing. 3 years ago, I remembered that summer. Daniel poring over papers, calling it estate planning. Claire had been irritated, saying it was a waste of time. Had he seen her true colors even then? My mind flashed to quiet moments, Daniel watching Claire with a furrowed brow, his voice softer when he spoke to me alone. I'd thought it was work stress, not this. Claire's voice rose, edged with panic. He was dying when he changed this. He wasn't thinking clearly. This isn't legal. Laura looked at her over her glasses. Daniel made these changes 6 weeks ago in person. I assessed his mental capacity, and we have a doctor's statement confirming he was lucid. These instructions are binding. Claire stood, her chair scraping loudly. "This is a mistake. I'm his wife. He wouldn't—" She stopped, her eyes locking onto mine, and the hatred in them made my breath catch. "You," she hissed. "You turned him against me." I held her gaze, my hand steady on my cane despite the tremor in my chest. "I didn't know about the will." I said quietly, "Daniel never told me." "Liar," she snapped, but her voice wavered, and I saw a flicker of doubt in her eyes. Lucas looked up from his phone, his earbuds out, his expression torn. Emily shrank into her seat, her pencil snapping in her hands. Laura cleared her throat. "There's more. Daniel's financial assets, approximately $950,000, are divided as follows: 60% to a trust for Lucas and Emily's education and needs, with Margaret as trustee, 20% to Margaret for her care, and 20% to Claire." Claire's laugh was sharp, brittle. 20%. "That's it, there's been a mistake." She turned to Laura, her voice rising. "I'm contesting this. He was medicated, manipulated." Laura's expression remained calm. Contesting would be costly and unlikely to succeed. "Daniel left a sealed letter, to be read if you challenge the will. Would you like me to open it now?" Claire sank back, her face a storm of fury and fear. "Go on," she said, her voice low. I sat frozen, my mind reeling. Daniel had seen through Claire, protected me, ensured I'd have a home, a purpose, but Claire's accusation hung heavy, and Lucas's silence cut deep. I wanted to reach for him, to explain, but the room felt like a tightrope, and one wrong step could send us all falling. Back at Willow Lane, Claire's anger was a living thing. She stormed through the house, slamming cabinets, her voice sharp as she spoke on the phone. "Mark." I assumed. "They can't do this," she said, her words muffled but fierce. "I'll fight it." I retreated to the garden, the roses my refuge, their wilted petals a quiet comfort. I felt like a shadow, unseen, unwanted, but Daniel's watch in my pocket was a reminder I was still here, still his mother. That afternoon, I called Susan, my dearest friend, a retired librarian who'd shared my teaching days. Her voice was a balm, but when I told her about Claire, she hesitated. "Maggie, grief twists people. Are you sure you heard her right? Maybe she's just scared." Lashing out. Her words stung, and doubt crept in. Was I misreading Claire's pain as betrayal? But then I heard her voice again, cold and calculated, planning to send me away. "I'm sure. Susan," I said, my voice trembling. "She wants me gone." Susan sighed. "Talk to her, then. You've always been good at fixing things." Fixing things? I'd spent my life mending Henry's heart, Daniel's scraped knees, this family, but this felt beyond repair. I hung up, my hands shaking, and opened my laptop, a clunky relic Daniel had set up. I wasn't tech-savvy, but I was determined to learn, to find something that might explain Daniel's arrangements. My fingers fumbled through old emails, and one caught my eye, sent a year ago. "Mom, if anything happens, check my office desk. Love you." My pulse quickened. His desk. Claire was always in there, sorting papers, but I'd never looked. Upstairs. Lucas's music pulsed through his door. I knocked, and he opened it, his eyes red, his jaw tight. "What?" "Grandma," he said, his tone sharp. "Just checking on you." I said, my heart aching. "I know today was hard." "Yeah, well, Mum says you're stirring things up," he muttered, looking away. "Why can't you just leave it alone?" His words pierced me, but I saw the boy beneath, grieving, confused. "I'm trying to honor your dad," I said softly. "He loved you more than anything." Lucas shrugged, shutting the door. I stood in the hallway, the sting of his rejection heavy. Claire was pulling him away. and I didn't know how to fight her. But Emily's drawing, slipped under my door that evening, a rose, vibrant and hopeful, reminded me of the love still tying us together. I thought of 1982, Henry and I planting roses with Daniel, his laughter echoing in the Carolina dusk. That love was my anchor, my reason to keep going. I made my way to Daniel's office, my cane tapping softly. The door was ajar, the room dim, smelling of leather and ink. Claire wasn't home. She'd left for a meeting, her purse slung over her shoulder, her eyes avoiding mine. I eased into Daniel's chair, my hands trembling as I opened the desk drawers. Papers, pens, a photo of us at the Blue Ridge cabin. Nothing unusual, but Daniel's email nagged at me. And I kept searching, my fingers brushing the underside of a drawer. Something was taped there, a small envelope. My name scrawled in Daniel's handwriting. My breath caught, and I sat back, the garden's roses visible through the window, their thorns sharp in the fading light. Whatever was inside, it was Daniel's last gift, and I wasn't ready to open it, not yet, but I held it close, knowing it might change everything. The evening light spilled through the office window, gilding the wilted roses in the garden outside. I sat at Daniel's desk, my hands trembling as I clutched the small envelope I'd found taped beneath the drawer. My name. Margaret was scrawled in his familiar handwriting, each letter a tether to the son I'd lost. The house at 312 Willow Lane was silent, Claire out for another of her meetings. Lucas and Emily tucked away in their rooms. I'm Margaret Thompson, 70 years old, and I'm sharing this story like we're sitting by my fireplace, the crackle of logs softening the weight of what I'm about to tell you. It's a story of secrets uncovered, of a mother's heart breaking and mending, of finding courage when you think you're all out of it. I held the envelope, my arthritis making my fingers clumsy, and felt the shape of something small inside a USB drive, maybe, or a key. Claire's words from the funeral home haunted me. She'll be out in a month. The will reading yesterday had shattered her plans, but her anger was a storm brewing, and I knew she wouldn't give up easily. Daniel's promise. I've made arrangements, had been my anchor, and now, this envelope felt like the answer he'd left behind. I thought of 2005 when Daniel and I rebuilt the garden after a storm tore through Raleigh. He'd been so determined, his hands caked with dirt, saying, "Mom, you're the strongest person I know." That memory steadied me, and I slid a letter opener under the flap. Inside was a USB drive and a folded note. Daniel's handwriting filling the page. My breath caught, and I unfolded it, the paper soft from his touch. Mom. It began. If you're reading this, things have gone as I feared. Claire's not who we thought. This drive has the truth financial records, emails, recordings. I started gathering it when I got suspicious last year. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I wanted to protect you, to confront her, but the cancer came, and I ran out of time. Use this to keep you and the kids safe. I love you, always. Daniel. Tears blurred the words, and I pressed the note to my chest, a sob breaking free. My boy had known. While he fought for his life, he'd carried this burden, shielding me from Claire's betrayal. I thought of his final weeks, his eyes clear despite the pain, whispering, "You'll be okay." He'd been fighting for us, even then. I wiped my eyes, the garden outside a quiet witness, its roses drooping but alive, like the hope stirring in me. I plugged the USB into Daniel's old laptop, my fingers fumbling with the keys. I'd never been good with computers. Claire always sighed when I asked for help, but I'd watched Daniel enough to manage. The screen lit up. Folders neatly labeled, finances, emails, recordings. I opened the first. my heart pounding. Bank statements showed Claire transferring $250,000 from their joint account to one in her name alone, starting 2 years ago. Receipts for jewelry, designer clothes, hotel stays in Charlotte, none of it for Daniel or the kids. My stomach churned. This was my money too, from the house I'd sold, the life I'd given up. The email folder was worse. Messages between Claire and Mark Evans, a real estate broker, stretched back 2 years. Can't wait to be free. Claire wrote, once he's gone, we'll sell the house, the cabin, everything. Arizona's waiting. Mark's replies were casual, intimate, planning a life built on my son's death. I closed my eyes, the betrayal a physical ache. I thought of 1978, when Henry and I danced under the stars at a summer fair, Daniel asleep in his stroller. We'd dreamed of a simple life, a family bound by love. How had it come to this? The recordings were the hardest. I hesitated, my finger hovering over the play button. Daniel's note said they were legal. North Carolina allowed single-party consent, but it felt like opening a wound. I clicked, and Claire's voice filled the room, cold and clear. Once Daniel's gone, we'll put her in a home, she said, her tone matter-of-fact. The kids won't care, and no one will question it. She's old. Mark, it's where she belongs. Mark laughed, and Claire continued. We'll sell Willow Lane, the Blue Ridge cabin, and start fresh, just you and me. I stopped the recording, my hand shaking. The roses outside seemed to wilt further, mirroring the grief and rage swirling in me. Claire hadn't just betrayed me, she'd betrayed Daniel, Lucas, Emily, the family we'd built. I thought of her at the will reading, her fury when Laura revealed Daniel's trust, her accusation. You turned him against me. She'd known he suspected her, and now I had proof. But what could I do? I was no lawyer, no fighter. I was just a mother, a grandmother, trying to hold on to what was left. I slipped the USB and note into my purse, next to Daniel's watch, and stood, my cane steadying me. The garden called, and I stepped outside, the evening air cool against my skin. The roses, though faded, held a stubborn beauty, their roots deep in the earth. I knelt, ignoring the ache in my knees, and touched a petal, soft and fragile. You're still here, I whispered. To the roses, to Daniel, to myself. So am I. Back inside, the house felt different, like a battlefield where I'd just found my weapon. But the fight wasn't just with Claire, it was with the kids, too. Lucas had pulled away, his words at the will reading echoing. Why can't you leave it alone? Claire was turning him against me, and Emily, sweet Emily, was caught in the middle. I climbed the stairs, my joints protesting, and knocked on Emily's door. She opened it, her eyes red, her sketchbook open to a drawing of a garden, vibrant with roses. Grandma, she said, hugging me, her warmth a balm. I had a bad dream. Dad was gone, and you were too. Oh, sweetheart, I said, sitting beside her. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. I smoothed her curls, my heart breaking for her fear. This drawing's beautiful. It's our garden, isn't it? She nodded. Dad said you made it special. Can we fix it, like you promised? We will, I said, my voice firm. We'll make it bloom again, just for him. Her smile was a gift, and I held it close, knowing Claire would try to take it away. The front door slammed, and Claire's heels clicked through the house. Emily, bedtime, she called, her voice sharp. She appeared in the doorway, her eyes narrowing as she saw us. Margaret, she needs rest. Don't keep her up with whatever this is. Just talking, I said, meeting her gaze. She had a nightmare. Claire's lips thinned. She's fine. Say goodnight, Emily. Emily hugged me again, then obeyed, leaving me alone with Claire's cold stare. Big day tomorrow, Claire said, her tone icy. I've got a lawyer looking into the will. This isn't over. She turned, her heels fading down the hall. I stood, my cane a quiet ally, and thought of Daniel's note. Use this to keep you and the kids safe. Claire thought she could bully me out, but she didn't know about the USB. The truth, Daniel had left. I needed help, someone who could turn his gift into justice. I thought of Laura Kim, her calm strength at the will reading, and decided to call her tomorrow. But first, I had to face the kids, to keep them close despite Claire's poison. The next morning, I found Lucas in the kitchen, his earbuds in, his breakfast untouched. Lucas, I said, sitting across from him. Can we talk? He pulled out an earbud, his eyes wary. What? I know you're hurting. I said, my voice soft. Your mom's saying things about me, and I don't blame you for being confused, but I love you, and I'm fighting for what your dad wanted for you, for Emily, for us. He looked away, his jaw tight. Mom says you're trying to take everything. That dad wasn't himself. Your dad was himself until the end. I said, my throat tight. He loved you more than anything. He made sure you'd be okay. I wanted to tell him about the USB, but not yet, not until I knew it was safe. Lucas shrugged, but his eyes softened. Just a fraction. Whatever, he muttered, but he didn't put his earbud back in. It was a crack in the wall, small but real. Claire's voice cut through the moment. Lucas, get your backpack, we're late. She stood in the doorway, her purse slung over her shoulder, her eyes flicking to me with suspicion. Margaret, don't fill his head with nonsense. I'm just talking to my grandson, I said, holding her gaze. She snorted, ushering Lucas out, and the door slammed behind them. I sat alone, the kitchen quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I thought of 1982, when Henry and I planted roses with Daniel, his tiny hands digging beside ours. This is our garden, Henry had said, our forever place. I'd given up that place for Claire and Daniel, thinking I was building a new one. Now, I saw the truth. Claire had taken it all, but Daniel had given it back. The USB was my proof, my way to honor his love. I pulled out my phone and dialed Laura's number, my hand steady despite the fear. Laura, it's Margaret Thompson, I said when she answered. I found something from Daniel. Evidence about Claire. Can we meet? Her voice was warm, professional. Of course. Margaret, bring it to my office tomorrow. We'll go through it together. I hung up. The garden visible through the window, its roses catching the morning light. They were battered, but their roots held strong, like the love tying me to Daniel, to Lucas, to Emily. Claire thought she'd won, but she didn't know the fight I had left. I touched Daniel's watch in my pocket, its ticking a heartbeat, and whispered, I'm ready, son. Let's make this right. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and old paper, a quiet space where truths were meant to be uncovered. I sat beside Laura Kim, my hands folded tightly in my lap, Daniel's watch a steady weight in my purse. The Raleigh courthouse was smaller than I'd imagined, its high windows letting in slants of morning light that danced across the floor. Across the aisle, Claire sat with her lawyer, Edward Vance, her navy dress impeccable, her face a mask of composed grief. But I saw the tension in her jaw, the flicker of fear in her eyes. I'm Margaret Thompson, 70 years old, and I'm sharing this story like we're sitting together on my porch swing. The creak of it softening the weight of this day. It's about standing tall when your knees want to buckle, about finding justice not for revenge, but for love. The past weeks had been a blur of pain and preparation. After finding Daniel's USB filled with proof of Claire's betrayal, I'd met Laura at her office, handing over the financial records, emails, and recordings. She'd listened, her eyes sharp but kind, and promised to build a case to protect Daniel's will. Claire had filed to contest it, claiming Daniel was manipulated, medicated, not himself when he changed his wishes. Her accusations cut deep, painting me as a scheming mother-in-law who'd turned her dying son against her. But Daniel's note, "Use this to keep you and the kids safe," was my guide, and I'd come to this courtroom to honor him. Judge Evelyn Harper, a woman in her 60s with a stern but fair gaze, settled at the bench, her robes rustling. The room was sparse, just a few spectators, including Susan, my friend, who'd driven from Cary to support me. Lucas sat in the back, his presence a surprise. At 15, he wasn't required to be here, but he'd insisted, his face pale but determined. Claire had tried to stop him, but the judge allowed it after Lucas spoke up. His voice steady. "I want to know what Dad wanted. Emily was at school, too young for this, but her drawing of our garden was tucked in my purse, a reminder of why I was fighting." This hearing addresses the petition to contest the will of Daniel Thompson. Judge Harper began, her voice clear. Mrs. Claire Thompson claims the deceased lacked capacity and was unduly influenced. Ms. Kim, you filed to dismiss the petition. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, Laura said, rising smoothly. We've submitted evidence that renders the contest moot, proving Mr. Thompson's intent and capacity, as well as Mrs. Thompson's actions contradicting her claims. Edward Vance stood, his suit sharp, his smile practiced. Your Honor, we object to this new evidence. It wasn't part of initial discovery. It was recently discovered, Laura replied calmly, and we followed procedure to admit it. Judge Harper peered over her glasses. I'll allow it. Mr. Vance, proceed. Ms. Kim. Laura nodded. Your Honor, we have evidence that Mrs. Thompson engaged in a 2-year extramarital affair during her husband's illness, planned to institutionalize her mother-in-law against her will, and intended to liquidate family assets meant for the children and Mrs. Thompson. These actions, documented by Mr. Thompson, show her motives for contesting the will. A murmur rippled through the room. Claire's face drained of color, her hands gripping the table. Lucas's eyes widened, his phone forgotten in his lap. I kept my gaze forward, my heart pounding, Daniel's watch ticking like a heartbeat in my purse. Laura continued, her voice steady. We have financial records showing Mrs. Thompson siphoned $250,000 to a private account, emails with her paramour, Mark Evans, planning to sell the family home in Blue Ridge Cabin, and recordings legal in North Carolina's single-party consent state where she discusses these plans explicitly. Claire shot up, her voice shrill. This is absurd. Edward's hand on her arm silenced her, but her eyes blazed at me, raw with hatred. Vance stood, his tone smooth. Your Honor, these accusations are irrelevant to the will's validity. Even if true, which we dispute, the evidence was obtained without my client's consent, making it inadmissible. Laura countered. The recordings were made by Mr. Thompson in his home and office, where he had legal rights. The emails were accessed from shared devices and joint accounts he had authority over. Judge Harper raised a hand. I'll review the evidence in chambers to determine admissibility. Let's proceed with testimony. Ms. Kim, your first witness. The defense calls Margaret Thompson, Laura said. I rose, my cane a quiet ally, and made my way to the stand, my knees trembling but my spine straight. The clerk swore me in, and I sat, facing the room. Laura's questions were gentle, guiding me through my story, my love for Daniel, the sale of my Cary home to fund Willow Lane, the trust I'd placed in Claire. I spoke of the funeral, Claire's words in the hallway. The USB Daniel left. My voice wavered, but I kept going, picturing the garden's roses, their roots holding fast. Mrs. Thompson, Laura asked, did you influence Daniel to change his will? No, I said. My voice clear. I didn't know about it until the reading. He never told me. Laura nodded, turning to the judge. No further questions. Vance approached, his smile cold. Mrs. Thompson, you were financially dependent on your son. Correct. Yes, I said, meeting his gaze. After my husband died, I sold our home and gave the money to Daniel and Claire. $350,000 for their future. And now you control significant assets that would have gone to his wife, he said, his tone insinuating. Convenient, isn't it? Laura objected. Argumentative, Your Honor. Sustained, Judge Harper said. Stick to questions. Mr. Vance. He pivoted. Have you been diagnosed with memory issues or dementia? No, I said firmly. My memory's clear. Yet you claim you didn't know about the will changes, he pressed. Isn't it possible you're misremembering conversations with your son? I leaned forward, my voice steady. I remember every moment with Daniel, especially his last. He told me he'd made arrangements, but not what they were. He was protecting me from this, exactly this. Vance's questions continued, painting me as confused, manipulative, but I held my ground. Daniel's love my shield. When I stepped down, my legs shook, but my heart was firm. I'd spoken for my son, for our family. Laura's next witness was a shock Mark Evans. Claire gasped as a tall man in his 30s entered, his sandy hair neat, his eyes avoiding hers. He was sworn in, his voice low as Laura began. Mr. Evans, describe your relationship with Claire Thompson, she said. We've been involved, he said, swallowing, for about 2 years, romantically. Intimately, Laura pressed. Yes, he admitted, his face flushing. We met at a real estate conference. She said her marriage was over, that she was staying until her husband passed. Claire's face contorted, her whisper loud in the quiet room. You traitor! Judge Harper's gavel cracked. Mrs. Thompson, control yourself. Laura continued, methodical, having Mark confirm the emails, the recordings, their plans to sell the family assets and move to Arizona. She said the mother-in-law would be in a home. He said quietly that it'd be easier that way. Vance's cross-examination was fierce, but Mark's testimony stood, corroborated by Daniel's evidence. From the back, Lucas's face was pale, his eyes wet, the truth about his mother sinking in. My heart broke for him, even as I knew he needed to hear it. As the hearing ended, Judge Harper announced she'd review the evidence and rule next week. But her glance at Claire, stern and knowing, told me enough. Daniel had won, his love reaching beyond the grave to protect us. Outside, the Raleigh air was warm, the dogwoods blooming. Lucas approached, his voice thick. Grandma, I'm sorry. I didn't know. About Mom. I pulled him close, his lanky frame trembling. It's okay, honey. Your dad loved you. That's what matters. Emily's drawing in my purse, the roses it held, felt like a promise we'd keep. We drove home. The garden waiting at Willow Lane, its roses catching the light. I thought of 1968, when I met Henry at a concert, dancing under a Carolina moon. I'd found love then, and now, in Lucas's hug, in Emily's trust, I found it again, not romance, but family, deeper than blood. Claire's defeat was coming, but my victory was already here, in the love Daniel had preserved. I touched his watch, its ticking a heartbeat, and whispered, "Thank you, son." We're almost home. The garden at 312 Willow Lane bloomed with roses, their petals a vibrant red against the soft green of early summer. I stood among them, my hands dusted with soil, the morning sun warm on my face. 2 years had passed since Daniel's death, since the courtroom where his love reached beyond the grave to protect us. At 72, I'd found a peace I hadn't thought possible, a quiet joy rooted deep like the flowers I tended. I'm Margaret Thompson. And I'm sharing the story like we're sitting together at my kitchen table, a plate of warm peach cobbler between us. It's a tale of loss and healing, of discovering at any age that you're worth fighting for. The house was alive with the sounds of family. Lucas's laughter from the porch, Emily's pencil scratching in her sketchbook. The roses, once wilted and forgotten, now thrived, a symbol of the life we'd rebuilt. I knelt to prune a stem, my arthritis a dull ache, and thought of the day Judge Evelyn Harper ruled in our favor. She'd dismissed Claire's petition to contest Daniel's will, upholding his wishes, the house and Blue Ridge cabin in a trust for me to live in, then for Lucas and Emily. His $950 and $1,000 split to secure our futures. Claire's face that day pale. Furious still lingered in my mind, but it no longer held power over me. Claire had taken her $190,000 and left for Phoenix with Mark Evans, her lover. But their relationship crumbled within a year. She'd given up custody of Lucas and Emily without much fight, a choice that shocked everyone but me. I'd seen her distance, her focus on appearances over love. Lucas, at 15, had chosen to stay with me. His voice firm, I want to be where Dad would have wanted. Emily, torn but loyal, followed her brother, her small hand in mine. Those first months were raw. Lucas angry at the world, Emily quiet, her sketches filled with shadows. We went to therapy, learning to name our pain, to rebuild trust. Why didn't Dad tell us about Mom? Lucas asked one night, his voice breaking. I held him, saying, he wanted to protect you, honey, but he made sure we'd be okay. We lived at Willow Lane now, the three of us. The house truly ours. I'd taken the master bedroom, a decision Claire fought bitterly, but Daniel's will was clear. I'd redecorated it, simply a quilt my mother made, a small table for my watercolors, a photo of Daniel by my bed. The garden was my sanctuary, where I taught Lucas to prune roses, where Emily sketched designs that echoed her father's creativity. Thompson Architectural Studio, Daniel's firm, thrived under a board he'd appointed, and they valued my input, surprising me with how much I'd learned about design at my age. Emily, now 13, showed a spark for it, her sketches of buildings pinned proudly on the fridge. Dad would love this one, she'd say, and I'd nod, tears blurring my smile. Lucas, 17 and tall like his father, was serious, talking about studying architecture at UNC. I want to make Dad proud. He told me, his voice steady. You already do, I said, ruffling his hair, though he ducked away, grinning. He'd grown into a young man, thoughtful, carrying Daniel's quiet strength. We used the Blue Ridge cabin often, spending Christmases there. The house filled with laughter and new traditions. Last winter, Susan and her family joined us, and we sang carols by the fire, the kids' voices mingling with the crackle of logs. Daniel would have loved it, I thought, his watch on my nightstand ticking softly. Claire called the kids on birthdays, her voice bright but strained. The conversations were short, awkward, her apologies falling flat. Last month, she sent a letter, her handwriting neat, begging forgiveness. I was wrong. She wrote, I lost sight of what mattered. Lucas read it, his jaw tight, and handed it to Emily, who tucked it away without a word. I kept it in a drawer, praying one day they'd find peace with her. But knowing their happiness didn't depend on it, Claire had made her choices, and we'd made ours to grow, to love, to bloom where we were planted. I stood, brushing dirt from my hands, and looked at the garden. It was our promise kept, a place Daniel's love still lived. I thought of 1975 when Henry and I planted our first roses in Kerry, Daniel toddling between us, his giggles brighter than the Carolina sun. That garden was gone, sold to fund this one, but its roots were in me, in the family we'd built. I'd given everything, my home, my savings, my dreams, thinking it was for love. Claire had tried to take it, but Daniel had given it back. His USB a shield against her betrayal. Life at 72 was sweeter than I'd expected. I'd joined a book club at the Raleigh Library. My old teaching days stirring as we debated Jane Austen over tea. I'd taken up watercolour painting, my canvases filled with roses, their colours soft like dawn. And there was Tom, a widower I met at the community garden, his laugh warm as we shared coffee at the diner. Nothing serious, just a friendship that made me feel seen, not as a grieving mother or doting grandmother, but as Margaret, a woman with stories to tell. I smiled, thinking of our last chat, his eyes crinkling as he teased me about my crooked tomato plants. Sometimes, I talked to Daniel, alone in the garden, the stars above Raleigh bright. I told him about Lucas's soccer goals, Emily's art awards, the firm's new projects. "You'd be proud," I whispered, touching his photo by my bed. "You did good, son." His watch ticked beside it, a heartbeat tying us together. Yesterday was the anniversary of his death. We visited his grave, Lucas and Emily beside me, laying roses we'd grown ourselves. "Dad would love that we're happy," Emily said, her voice soft. Lucas nodded, his arm around my shoulders, and that Mom learned her lesson. I laughed, a sound I hadn't thought I'd find again. Claire's words at the funeral. "She's too old to be rattling around my house," had been her plan to erase me. But in the end, she was the one who left, her bags packed, her dreams unraveling. Daniel had seen to that. His last act of love. I thought of 1968 when I met Henry at a concert, dancing under a Carolina moon. I'd found love then and now, in this garden, in my grandchildren's eyes. I found it again. Not the wild passion of youth, but a steady, quiet love, like roots reaching deep. The back door creaked, and Emily ran out, her sketchbook flapping. "Grandma, look." She held up a drawing of our garden, roses bursting with colour, a small figure, me smiling in the centre. "It's for you." "Oh, honey," I said, pulling her close. "It's perfect." Lucas followed, a soccer ball under his arm, his grin Daniel's echo. "We're grilling tonight. Right, I'm starving." "You're always starving," I teased, standing with my cane. The garden glowed, the roses a testament to our healing. I thought of Claire's letter, her plea for forgiveness, and felt a pang of pity. I'd forgiven her, not for her sake, but for mine. To let go of the anger that once weighed me down. Whether Lucas and Emily would was their choice, and I'd love them through it. As we walked inside, the kitchen smelling of cornbread baking, I paused, looking back at the garden. It was our home, our forever place, built on Daniel's love, on the strength I'd found at 70. I'd been a teacher, a wife, a mother, a grandmother, but now I was Margaret, whole and enough. The stars were peeking through the dusk, and I whispered to Daniel, to the roses, to the life we'd grown. "We're home, son. We're home." Life had taught me this no matter your age. You deserve love, respect, a place to bloom, like a garden. You can always grow again, even after the hardest winters. I touched Daniel's watch, its ticking a promise, and smiled, ready for whatever came next. Thank you for walking this journey with me. If my story moved you, please subscribe for more tales of heart and hope. Share your city in the comments. Let's see how far this garden grows.